Hello there, my name is Mouse, and today we're going to be looking at how to create this spiral animation in Blender, abstract animation in Blender. You can see we have some fire effects and yeah, like that. If you want to download the project files, you can become a Patreon so that you can examine the project files yourself, and it's also a way to support the channel. So let's first break down the project, and then we can go into the step-by-step tutorial. Just bring back all my layers. Yeah, so we have this layer, but before we get into that, let me first show you how this fire effect, how cool this fire effect is. Let's see how it comes in and consumes the entire spiral object. I think it looks really cool. Let me just look at it from this view here. Let's see how it transitions. It's burning through the entire thing. Also added these kind of flakes this flakes particle system that is breaking off from the main mesh, and when you layer them together, you get that kind of fiery effect going on, which I think looks really cool. Now, yeah, let's go in and start creating this. The first thing we're going to do is make this spiral object. This spiral object, and to do that, we can start by adding a plane. Go to edit mode and delete. Let me turn on my screen keys here so that you can see what I'm doing. Go into edit mode, hit X and delete all the faces, but make sure you retain the edges or vertices. Now we can add a screw modifier to this. Let's rotate this 90 degrees and increase the screw value. Now you can also go to the object data, turn on auto smooth so that we can see the edges nicely, and we can also under normals. Yeah, okay, auto smooth is on, and that's good. You can increase the segments if you want, so that is much more smoother ring. And these edges are too sharp for me, so I'm just going to give them a nice bevel so that we can round them off. Make sure that the limit method is set to angle, and turn on added normals to have some nice rounded corners like that. Now we want this to turn this into a circle or like a donut shape. So what we're going to do is use the simple default modifier. Yes, find the right axis. Okay. If what we want to use this to bend this around, so instead of using twist, let's use bend. Let's find the right axis here. Okay, something like that. You want to bend it all the way until it touches, so it should be 360 for this to touch. So just type that in, and we have our spiral. Now if you want to animate it in the same way that this is animated, that's very simple. You can go to edit mode, make sure you have the entire object selected, and use the shortcut Ctrl H to add a hook. And let me first go to, because it's too small for me to see, I'm just going to go to the display properties of the hook and just increase the size. I don't scale it in the x-axis in the object mode because it will also scale up the object itself. Just select the hook, go to the object data for that hook, and just play with the size here, the display size for that. Now we can see what's going on. Now since this hook is the parent of these vertices, if we rotate it, it should be able to animate I'll just call this a donut. It gives us a nice donut, and you can also use this to control the shape. I wouldn't recommend that, but yeah. So let's give this a nice rotation. So just start from there and rotate 360. I've started keyframe recording, and I'm just just going to use linear interpolation here. Okay, we have our animation. Now all we are left with is to add in these balls here. Now we're going to use the hair particle system, so let's go to that and add a new particle system. Make sure you have this set to hair. You won't see anything because if you want to see the hair particles, make sure you turn on advanced and go under emission, source, and make sure you use modifier stack. You can see what we have. Let's go back, see. Okay, this is what we want. Now if you go back to the advanced emission source, we can also make sure that play with settings here just a bit so that we have particles in all directions. I'm going to shift N so that I can recalculate my normals just so they're facing the right direction. Let me see, since some of them are facing on the inside, but that won't matter because I won't be seeing these hair particles. We are going to switch them out for spheres. Now let's add, if we use a UV sphere, you can see that this has a lot of polygons, so you can try to reduce the number of segments here, but still the more segments you reduce, the sphere won't look that good. So what we're going to do is add a cube, use Ctrl 2 to add a subdivision surface, apply that. I think this gives us a better sphere without that many subdivisions. Now this is going to be used for our particle system here, so we can go under the particle system and under the render option we can select that cube. Make sure you change this to object and select the cube. You can see how the particles are distributed. Now I don't want to see the surface here, so I'll go to the display properties and under instancing I can turn off viewport and render so that I don't see the mesh or the emitter, but just see the particles. Now if you go to the particles, you see that we have this set. We have the source distribution set to random, so I want this to be a bit even so that we can see the pattern of the mesh. And if I increase the number of particles here, let's say something like 2000, and let's see, make sure that each face of this mesh gives us one particle. You can just set it to 1 like that. But if we look at the base mesh, let me first go back to viewport render and maybe turn on wireframe here so that we can see the number of faces we have. And I want this to flip these normals because right now they're facing. Okay, you can see that in the particle setting we want each face to have only one particle, but we don't have a lot of faces here, so we can come in here, go back to edit mode and have everything selected, subdivide this, and that should give us 2 extra polygons to work with, 2 extra faces to work with. I can subdivide this even further so that we have quite a number of faces. Okay, seems we're having a few issues here. Screw. Okay, yeah. Since we have just subdivided this and this is not part, the subdivisions we have just made are not part of this hook, they're not parental to this hook. When we are rotating this, they're not being rotated as well, so that's why you see we have that issue. So what we're going to do is just select everything. We can select the hook and then this, the mesh, and then Control H, assign to hook, so that these also the new subdivisions are also add it to the hook. Now if we play back, you can see everything rotates, so that should clear out the issue we're having. And now we can bring back the bezel, simple deform, and then our particles. Let's turn off the wireframe. It doesn't, and you can see we have a particle for every face on our mesh, but this is too much evenly distributed. So what we can do is randomize it a bit by using the jitter, or just using a random order here, or increasing the particle per face count. You can also play around with the size and add more particles, just depending on the kind of the look you're going for. I usually, what I found to be the most effective workflow is to set up your lighting before you start playing with the particles, so that you can see how the number of particles affects your results and the look of your results. So let me just do some quick materials here. I'm just going to use this dark, and we don't want to render the mesh, so just turn that off, and let me add a background ramp here. To use for the background, extrude, something like that. Bring it back. You want to use smaller particles to get a more defined shape, like you see here, but we need more particles here so that the shape is even more defined. Do you think that looks good enough? Now we can play with the lighting. I'm just going to reduce some of the light, make the background black, and then start to play with the lighting a bit. I'm not going to make it too fancy. Add this, make it a bit brownish like that. Now for the background, I'm going to give it a dark material so that it doesn't come out too much, something like that. Maybe add an area light, bluish light, to contrast the warm light in the background there. Maybe add another one here. Maybe make this, bring another one down here, make it a bit more reddish. Let me increase the particle count, the size of the particles just a bit. I think that looks good enough. Now let's see what else can we do. Now we can start adding in the fire effect. Just access that. Now for the fire, you can see that it starts off from the center and then engulfs the entire object. Now to set that up, that's very easy. What we're going to do is first duplicate this and remove the particle system from the duplicate. Now you can see what we have. So that also doesn't look too bad. Now, to make things look better, let's start working on that fire effect. So I'll add a new material for this. And the first thing we're going to do is add a noise texture. Can scale it maybe to that side. Add a color ramp to make it a bit contrasted. Now to make it look like fire, you can increase the distortion, not too much, or something like that. And to make the fire look a bit animated, we can use object coordinate mapping. So I'll just switch this to this, and when the mesh rotates, the fire looks a bit animated. We don't want to put too much work into the fire, so let's give it light it up, give it some color. We'll just duplicate this color ramp and create a fire gradient. We can start off with black and then have red, kind of orange red like that, and I can have some orange there, maybe this, something like that. So that's going to be our fire, but we don't want it to engulf the entire thing at once. We want it to have a transition, like starting from this side and then comes in. Let me turn on bloom, just so that this looks a bit better. And I want this to be an emission shader, so just add an emission shader. Now you can see increase the strength at above 10, and you can see we have our fire effect. Now to have it engulf the surface, we can add an empty like that. Now if we select this object and give it a gradient texture, gradient, let's preview this using Ctrl T. We can use object mapping. So if I select this, I can use the object mapping of this sphere to control the position of the gradient. And let me see if I selected it. Okay, make sure that I'm using object mapping here. Now if I move this back and forth, you can see we can create that gradient. You might need to rotate your empty to get the right orientation, as this might you might find that yours is up down instead of back and front. So if it's like that, just rotate it to the right axis until you get the transition you want, or something like that. So I want this. Now then, if we get that, what we can do is use a math node here, convert math node and subtract. I think it's subtracting. Yeah. So if we start like this, we can create. Actually, it should be the other way around. So this subtracted from, so that we can start from here and then bring the fire forward. Now I can animate this, set a keyframe there and set a keyframe around here. Just going to move this a bit forward so that we start off while there is no fire, and then just starts engulfing the entire object. So now if we feed this into the car ramp, we should be able to get the fire effect we are looking for. Okay, and we can play with the scale of the noise here. Perfect. Now if we layer it on top of these, we should see something like that. Now everything that is left is you just have to play with the materials. A time-lapse version of how I did the original version, this version here, is going to be available on my second channel, Blender Money. So if you want to watch that, you can watch that so that you can see how I set up the lighting and everything, as I'm not going to show that here, just so the tutorial is not too long. Anyway, I think that's it. If you want to get the project files, you can find them on my Patreon page. And yeah, thank you for watching. If you want to subscribe, leave a likes, and see you in the next video.